Remember how gas suddenly cost $4 a gallon last year? How food prices rose sky high too? Well, let me tell you a little story about where all that came from. It starts with the dot-com bubble in the year 2000. Everyone thought that technology was the thing to invest in. Nobody could lose, they thought. With huge pools of money, speculative investors were able to inflate the prices on these stocks and create a bubble. But the bubble got too big, and ultimately it burst, and a lot of people got burned. Not satisfied with the money they made in the stock market, Wall Street fat cats moved on to housing. You've heard of the housing bubble, right? This time, homeowners from across the country could get involved. But most did not realize how flimsy the system was. As the housing bubble burst, the same fat cats pulled their money out of real estate and housing and put the same huge sums of money into oil and gas, and as the prices skyrocketed, you can guess who felt the effects of this trading. If that wasn't enough, they convinced big investors like pension funds and endowments that even food was a legitimate thing to bet on, and poured billions of dollars into food commodity markets, driving up the prices to eat around the world. Other commodities like corn and soybeans saw their prices skyrocket too. The UN estimates that more than 130 million people were driven to hunger due to these dangerous practices, and this set off food riots all over the world. This is what it looked like at another time in our history when fat cats ran the show. It sure looked like everyone was winning, and so everyone kept on betting. But that wouldn't last for long. There's no way it could. After the bubble burst in 1929, Congress enacted some common sense safeguards to prevent the markets from becoming no-holds-barred casinos. A tiny number of fat cats hit the jackpot off the collapse, while most regular Americans were plunged into deep despair. After the Great Depression, we created more stable and secure futures markets for commodities. Commodities like oil, natural gas, corn, wheat, and beef. We were careful to set up a sound and safe market so that no one could come in with huge sums of money and create bubbles again like in 1929. These futures markets allowed farmers and food producers to buy some protection against unexpected and wild price swings. Limited speculation was allowed to provide enough money into the system to keep everything running smoothly. America's sound, stable markets, set up to avoid a repeat of the Great Depression, worked fine for many decades. But then, some geniuses at Enron thought it would be good to play with the structure of these markets. So they started with the energy market. They wanted to rig it to win big, really big. So they talked to some friends in Washington and got to rearranging a few things in the energy sector. You know what regular Americans got with that? Rolling brownouts and blackouts in California. But it made the fat cats at Enron a bundle, and other fat cats saw opportunity. So they talked to their friends in Washington and got some changes in other areas. After getting Congress to open up these new casinos, Goldman Sachs, AIG, and others went out to convince very large pension funds and university endowments that commodities could be a legitimate long-term investment. But there's a big difference between investing in a company's stock and speculating on food and oil. When these big investors poured huge sums of money into food and oil commodities futures, they drove prices up around the world. Prices for people's daily bread and for the energy to power their economies. Those that were most seriously affected were those that had nothing to do with the market. Poor people, who were already spending more than half their income just for food, were suddenly unable to buy enough to feed their families. Fat cat investors should never get rich off people going hungry. We need to stop this madness now. And we can. Many in Congress want to bring back the fair, secure commodity futures markets that we used to have. But Wall Street is lobbying hard to avoid any real changes. Let your legislator know that you want them to bring back common sense rules to protect us from dangerous food and energy bubbles.